Have you ever tried to do something really special for someone? Something that would show all your love, devotion, care, and attention to detail? I, Alex, am in just such a situation. And honestly, I never thought that this special day would turn into this. But let's get to the point. So, anniversary. The 10th anniversary is the number we've all heard about in movies and songs. 10 years isn't just a number. It's a moment when you look at your life and realize that you're about to have that moment when, well, you've realized everything. Realized that you've been through so much, experienced moments that you probably should have kept quiet about. Yes, it's years of life together, but it's also a huge journey with reticences, resentments, fears, joys, laughter, and yes, at times, with a little spoonfuls of tar. But despite all the challenges, you decide that this day should still be important in some way. Not just another dinner, not another trip to a restaurant, not another nice gift. No, this time it should be something that will leave a mark, that will be remembered for a lifetime. So I thought I'd surprise her. Surprise! Yes, I was sure of my plan. A candlelight dinner, champagne, her favorite flowers, an unusual place, something she didn't expect. I'm not new at this, I know how to surprise. I've got it all worked out, every detail in its place. I picked the place she's been dreaming of for a long time. I've even ordered her favorite music for the atmosphere. It's going to be magical. But, as it happens, when you prepare something meticulously, things can go wrong. And believe me, in my case, it went wrong more than ever. Well, let me not keep you in suspense. This day changed me and our relationship. But I'll admit, I couldn't have imagined it would go this way. Getting to the point, here's how it went. The day I started preparing for this surprise, I was nervous to say the least. You see, I've always wanted to do something special. It's important to me that Lena feels how much I appreciate her, how important she is to me. She and I have been through a lot, and if you knew what I've been through myself, in terms of how I've been through all these years, you'd understand. No, well, to be perfectly honest, I've been going through most of the 10 years. I don't know about her, but it was always a little unclear to me how serious it was. Yeah, it sounds a bit sad, but that's not the point. I've decided this is the day I'm going to give it my best shot. Evening, candlelight, kitchen, champagne. The weather was going to be perfect, by the way, and she loved evening walks, especially by the water. I wanted her to feel more than ever. Because honestly, I thought I deserved for her to feel that magic, that thread that connected us. I turned a blind eye to every possible minor hardship, like the fact that I had to spend a couple hours at the grocery store, trying to buy something that might fit her perfect taste standards. Or the way I struggled with cups and cutlery that I didn't know how to arrange properly. But that's all nonsense. Because I knew that when she walked into the room and saw the whole thing, her eyes would be full of wonder. And it was all worth the effort. That's when I hit my first obstacle. Lena was on her phone. For a long time I had seen her heavily attached to it, but it didn't bother me at the time. After all, there was nothing on her phone that stressed me out. It's just that at that point, as the years went by, I started to notice that she started to have a lot of secrets. Not loud ones, not shocking ones, just ones she wouldn't tell me. And if I hadn't thought about it before now, I don't know how to explain it. Every year I became more sensitive to these things. Lena has always been a mystery to me. And I know that I'm not the only one who has experienced such moments, when everything seems to be fine, but some small detail makes you doubt. I was comfortable in our marriage, in our cozy world, but this strange atmosphere started to change. I felt like she became kind of detached, like she wasn't with me all the way. It wasn't some huge secret, but the little moments were disturbing. She'd leave her phone when I came into the room, often disappearing for a couple hours without explanation, and always finding a reason not to spend time around me. Just little things. But at that moment, I was too absorbed in preparing for the surprise, and honestly, I was putting it all on hold, determined not to think about the little things. It'll be fine, I thought. As long as she liked it. But now, as I approached her with a bottle of champagne to discuss the final moments of the party, what I discovered, it wasn't just an alarm. It was the moment I realized that things could go wrong. She was sitting on the couch, her eyes fixed on her phone screen. I didn't intervene, but for a second it hit me, a strange feeling. It wasn't just a casual glance at the screen. It was something more. We all know when someone is hiding something, and when it's just a misunderstanding. It was that moment when I felt like I was standing on the threshold of something important. But what? I felt awkward, and in that second I realized that this might not be what I had imagined it to be. And that's how I started to worry. What if this isn't a surprise for her? What if this turns out to be a surprise for me? At the time, I didn't know yet that this would be the first step to tearing down everything I'd been building all these years. But that moment was the starting point. You've probably ever felt what I felt at the time, that weird feeling when your heart beats a little faster, when the feeling of anxiety is overwhelming, but you still try to convince yourself that it's just paranoia. So that's the feeling I woke up with the day after that very evening. Everything seemed fine, but there it was, something was wrong. Or rather, something had been wrong for a long time, but I just didn't want to notice it. Have you ever thought that sometimes the biggest problems are the ones we'd rather not think about? At first they seem so small that you just can't take them seriously. You sort of perceive them on the level of, well, it's not that big of a deal, and go on living, hoping that everything will be fine. But it's these little things that we don't pay attention to that can lead to something much bigger. I knew for sure something was going on, but I never thought it would turn out this way. Let me tell you how it all started. It started with one small detail that seemed like it would have been easy to ignore if it hadn't been for. It was another text message on Lena's phone. She was sitting on the couch, her face focused, and her fingers running quickly across the phone screen. I saw the whole thing, and while I wasn't going to be too nosy, the look on her face, her demeanor in that moment seemed odd to me. I often walk around her, pretending not to notice. I don't like it when people try to make a detective out of me, and I didn't like it when someone invaded my personal space either. This time, however, something in her demeanor made me linger. It wasn't something overt, some shocking moment. It was just a normal situation where you're sitting there and someone, in their own little, cozy world, doesn't notice you watching. It was just like that. And that's when I noticed that she was refusing to socialize, avoiding meeting my gaze, her eyes running across the phone screen, as if she was reading something incredibly important and couldn't afford to be distracted. No laughs, no familiar phrases, no reaction to my attempts at conversation. I thought I'd just waited too long. That maybe it was just a habit, she was just engrossed in something, a game or chatting with a friend or something. But something inside me started to tingle. No, it wasn't just a feeling of discomfort, but rather a feeling that I could no longer be sure of what was going on around me. I then thought, what if I don't know her the way I think I do? Thought that maybe I shouldn't get too bogged down with unnecessary worries. But it's the little things, isn't it, that build everything up? I figured it was no big deal. It was business as usual. In fact, it could have been an accident. Someone distracted her, maybe some important work-related messages. After all, it wasn't like she was always with me, and I could have been on my phone too if I didn't care enough to surprise her. I'd gotten distracted myself in preparing this evening, and I didn't want to think that her attention to her phone could mean something else. But here's the weird little things kept coming up. A day or two later, I casually asked Lena where she went in the evenings, what was going on with her plans. Just curious to see if there were any opportunities for us to spend more time together. Usually she would reply that she was busy, that she had important things to do or meetings. But this time her answer was so evasive that I didn't know how to respond anymore. Are you hiding something? I thought. She wouldn't have stood for such directness and would have answered right away, but here it was as if she was struggling to find the right words. Her eyes avoided my gaze for a moment. At that moment I realized that something was wrong, but I didn't know what it was. Yes, of course, I could have continued to live in ignorance. I could have ignored these little things and continued to accept everything as normal behavior for a woman who was just going through some minor tension at work or in her personal relationships. But something was nagging me, something was making me wonder. I felt like I was being pushed aside, like I wasn't such an important person in her life anymore. The feeling was elusive, but it was there. It's embarrassing to admit, but one day when I was alone in the house, I picked up her phone. Honestly, I didn't want to do that. I was generally an advocate of not prying into another person's private things, but that overwhelming curiosity, and that moment when you feel like you're being bypassed, made me take that step. I was truly convinced I wasn't going to find anything important. I thought it was just one of those situations where you feel like the whole world is against you, but it really wasn't. I opened her messages. It was just as I expected, the usual work issues, messages from girlfriends, some cute correspondence. But in the midst of it all, I noticed one strange message. It wasn't from her friends, it wasn't from her co-workers. It was just a number with no name, but the message was clear. Did you remember we're meeting on Friday? Only 3 words, but everything they meant was so obvious that I felt my breath catch. I quickly put the phone away, and my thoughts filled me. What was this conversation about? What meetup was this about? This was a message that was hardly just a mistake or a joke. Why Friday in particular? Why not be specific? And most importantly, who is this person who is so quick to decide to have these conversations with my wife? Why was this number in her phone, and why didn't I know about it? I felt the tension in my chest grow. Everything seemed to be in place, nothing was ruined, but this little detail, it was changing everything. It was as if someone had quietly moved a piece of the mosaic, and everything I saw no longer fit together. I didn't know what to do. All I could do was take a step back and analyze the situation. But what good would that do me? After all, I already had enough little doubts that I didn't just keep pretending everything was fine. One way or another, I realized that something was going on. But what? In that moment, as I stood in front of her phone, my mind literally couldn't keep up with what I was about to do. What if I'm wrong? That question kept swirling around in my head. I knew for a fact that I shouldn't have gotten into her personal belongings. Knew it violated every possible boundary. But still, something inside me was pushing me to take that step. I couldn't just sit back and wait for my suspicions to snowball. Hell, I was too nervous, too anxious. But I lacked clarity, didn't I? Everything I saw and heard indicated that I was in some strange and uncomfortable position. She began to avoid me, her demeanor became more reticent, and my attempts to talk were met with evasive responses. And now, that moment when you realize you need to know the truth, so be it. At first, I tried to reassure myself, just wait, maybe it's okay. Maybe it's just your fantasy. But I couldn't stop anymore. One thought kept running through my mind, if not now, when? I needed to figure out what was going on. So I picked up her phone. Don't think I was being reckless. No, I thought it would be easy. I wasn't even going to sit on her messages for long. I'm just gonna look, see if there's anything unusual, and then I'm done. That was the plan. But it was the first step into a real nightmare. Her code was simple, she never hid her phone from me. It was the same as it always was, and there was no problem with that. I yanked the screen, and it opened immediately. And that's when I realized my mistake. That first glance was a kind of trap for me. I thought it would be quick and easy. But when I saw him, I realized I was in the middle of a labyrinth. It was like stepping into an abyss. On the screen was the same number I'd seen before. And something made me click on the correspondence, even though I shouldn't have. It was her messages with him. That was all I needed to see to realize that I wasn't just worried. It was actual confirmation that my wife was communicating with this man. But what I read was much worse. Seeing her latest messages. In response to his offer to meet, she writes, "Yes, I will. It will be done like you said, just no one can find out about it." I couldn't believe my eyes. Who is this? Why is she keeping this from me? What does everything will be done mean? My heart beat faster, but I forced myself to continue. I scrolled further and found more messages. She had a habit of using short phrases, but all of them were haunting. Each word felt like it was cutting me to the bone. "He can't know anything," she wrote in one message. "I won't fool him if it's done right," she wrote in another. I tried to rationalize what I was reading, but something inside me couldn't be fooled anymore. I knew my wife. And while we had our moments, I knew for a fact that she wouldn't be so secretive if everything was clean. I didn't know what was waiting for me behind every click. What awaited me when I opened those damn messages. Terror gripped me. Everything I read didn't add up to a normal picture. In every message, she was talking about meetings I never knew about, details I couldn't understand. But the worst part was that in these correspondences she made absolutely no attempt to hide her identity. Her response was even kind of defiant. It was as if she herself expected that I wouldn't be able to understand, or that I wouldn't even want to do it. Thank goodness I hadn't opened all the messages yet at that point. I felt everything inside me shrink. It was as if someone had turned off the lights in the room, and I was left in complete darkness, completely lost. I was in pain, hurt not from being in this position, but from the fact that I didn't know what to do. What do you do when your own wife is hiding something like this from you? Why didn't she tell me? Why didn't she tell me everything as it was? I realized that if I kept looking, nothing good would come of it. Still, I kept scrolling through the messages. One by one. I wanted to understand everything to the end, so I wouldn't be deceived. Because if I stopped, I wouldn't know the whole truth. Then I came across one note she had left for herself on her notes app. She usually used it to jot down some ideas, but what I read couldn't help but shock me. There was an entire instruction manual written there. An instruction manual that dealt with plans. Yes, a plan. And everything it said had some strange, intense subtext. If he asks, tell him you've been busy. He can't know. She was clearly preparing for something. Preparing for something big, but hiding it from me. I felt my mind start to go crazy. What was I supposed to do about this? How could I continue to live if this was true? And the more I delved into her secrets, the more they became unsolvable to me. I thought I would eventually find some key clue, something that would explain it all. But instead, I got even more confused. With each new discovery, I found it harder and harder to figure out where the truth finally lay. Who was this man? Why was she hiding her relationship with him? Why had she been acting so strange lately? I was scared, not because of what I had learned, but because I didn't realize how deep that abyss was. That moment when you can't turn back. It was like a train rushing down the tracks, and I didn't know how to stop it. But I kept going. I realized that if I didn't figure it out, I couldn't continue to live with this doubt. This was my last attempt to find answers. But I realized more and more that the answers were not what I had hoped for. As I sat with Lena in our living room, and her face was so calm, I felt like I was going crazy. I think I had experienced every emotion a person can experience, from panic to the strange feeling of detachment when your life, which seems so stable, begins to splinter into pieces, and you don't know what is true and what is a product of your own fears. I didn't know where to begin. Admittedly, I wasn't sure I wanted to start it at all. I knew if I asked, I'd never be able to go back. And if I told her I knew she was hiding something, I wouldn't know exactly what to do with that knowledge. But not asking was impossible. I already knew that if I didn't figure it out, this uncertainty and anxiety would haunt me until the very end. Lena, I need to talk to you, I said, trying to hide the anxiety in my voice, but failing completely. She was sitting across from me on the couch, phone in hand, and not a single thought or movement escaped her eyes. It was as if she didn't notice my tension, as if I was nothing more than a fleeting background she wasn't paying attention to. But in her eyes I read a strange evasiveness. They were avoiding my gaze. What do you want to talk about? Her voice was warm, but it didn't have its former liveliness. It sounded almost as if she was waiting for me to say something, but didn't know what to say. It was very strange. You've been avoiding the conversation the whole time, Lena. You wouldn't answer my questions. You've been acting differently. And I feel like you're hiding something. She seemed numb for a second, but she came to her senses quickly. I don't know what you're talking about, Alex. You're making this up. Her face remained calm, but now I could see her fingers tightening around the phone, like it was the only thing that could protect her. She glanced quickly at the screen, but when she realized I'd noticed her movement, she pretended to just check her messages. I felt anxiety growing inside me, and not just because of her reaction. I knew something was wrong. I knew she sensed I knew something, and now her focus had shifted to covering her tracks. But what is she hiding? Can you at least look me in the eye and tell me everything is okay? I tried to keep my voice calm, but I was having a hard time. She raised her head and looked at me, but it was a look I couldn't understand. It wasn't something I was used to seeing. It was a look that had none of the usual warmth or intimacy in it. I didn't know what she was hiding, but I knew for sure she was hiding something. At that moment, I felt our relationship begin to crumble, brick by brick, and honestly, I didn't know how to stop the process. It's okay, Alex. You're probably just overestimating the situation. You're just overthinking all of this. Her words became so smooth, too right. She wasn't arguing, she wasn't defending herself. She was just dodging all my questions. I could feel myself just being blown away by her calmness, her certainty that I was the one in the wrong. Lena, don't play with me. I couldn't hide my irritation anymore. There wasn't the slightest bit of regret or apology in her voice. She looked at me as if I was too petty, too unworthy of her time. There was a kind of detachment in her calmness, as if she wasn't ready to admit that I could understand anything. I'm not playing with you, Alex. You're just starting to make a big deal out of it. You know, I've always said I have weird days. Maybe you just don't understand what's going on. We can all be a little jumpy when something's wrong. It was like a punch in the face. Her words were soft, but they hid such cruelty, such flippancy, that I didn't know how to react. I was beginning to lose confidence, because now she spoke as if my feelings and experiences were completely insignificant. I tried again to look for something in her eyes, even the slightest clue that might help me understand. I tried to read her body, her posture, but everything I saw was fake. Her calmness was becoming more and more painful to me. I knew something was wrong. And in that moment, sitting across from her, I realized that I could no longer trust what she was saying. Lena, do you really think I don't know what's going on? Do you really think I haven't noticed anything? I couldn't keep quiet. I held back my rage, but it was still getting through me. I was pretty sure she could feel this tension, this pain, and that it was getting harder for her too. She tried to distract herself again, pretended that something important had come into her phone, but I already knew it was just an attempt to hide from reality. She couldn't keep doing this without at least confessing something. There was uncertainty in her face, but her evasiveness wouldn't go away. Why do you keep avoiding my questions? Why can't you just answer me? Why are you acting so weird? Don't you realize that it's not just my worries? You know something's wrong. I felt my words, though full of pain, were actually ruining everything. We were becoming more distant with each passing moment. Lena sighed quietly and put her phone down on the table. She wasn't trying to hide anymore, but there was anxiety in her eyes. Not the kind of anxiety I was expecting, but the anxiety that I could guess what was behind her calmness. Alex, you're right to notice the weirdness, but I can't explain it all at once. It's not that simple. You wouldn't understand. Her voice sounded soft, but I knew she wouldn't explain anything. She just had a way of saying things that left me puzzled. In that moment, I felt everything I knew about our life crumble. I realized that I lacked not only proof, but also the certainty that I was right. What if this was all my fantasy? What if I was wrong? Everything was becoming more and more cloudy. My mind couldn't separate reality from what I thought I was seeing. I looked at her and tried to find answers in her eyes, but I could find nothing but emptiness. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I created this world out of my own fears. But if that was true, then why did I feel so empty and lonely around her? We sat in silence, each in our own world, but I knew I could never go back. The questions I had asked couldn't be forgotten. And most importantly, I didn't know what would happen next. I sat on the couch, trying to gather my thoughts, but all I felt was disappointment. Lena was sitting across from me, still silent, but her gaze was different now, not as confident as before. She didn't try to hide her tension, but she didn't try to make excuses either. I knew that if I didn't address this situation right now, I would be drowning in my own thoughts. I needed to realize what was really going on, and it was probably too late to ask why. That moment when you realize things aren't what you thought they were, it comes suddenly. You're not ready for it. You're not ready for the truth you've been avoiding for so long to turn out not to be what you'd hoped for. And everything you've done before loses all value. You realize that you don't know who you're really living with. It's a pain that is unrelenting, and it will haunt you. I felt that the conversation with Lena had come to the very point where she had to reveal everything. I was ready to hear everything she was hiding, and I didn't want to wait any longer. I knew that it wouldn't be just an explanation that would dispel my doubts, but would rather open up a whole new reality in front of me that would consume me even more. Lena, I started weakly, not knowing how to continue the conversation, but the need to continue spoke for itself. I need to understand what's going on. You have to explain to me what you've been hiding all these weeks, all these months. I can't live in this chaos anymore. She sighed, her eyes even more serious than before. She couldn't hide it anymore. I knew she had something to say, and now she was ready to share it with the world. You're right, she said the words with a touch of weariness, but there was no regret or remorse in her voice. I've been hiding a lot of things, but you wouldn't understand that, Alex. I felt my fingers clench into a fist, but I forced myself to keep control. I knew I had to listen. This was important, and I had to continue. You've been hiding something from me all this time, and now you're telling me I won't understand? I felt the underlying anger start to spread through me, but I held back. This was a moment where I could change things. I already know what's wrong. I've seen those messages. I know what's going on. She rubbed her forehead as if she was having a hard time thinking of what needed to be said. Yes, you've seen the messages, but it's not as easy as you think. Not everything you read can be understood the way you think. I wasn't just hiding something. I was trying to protect both of us. You don't understand how complicated it is. Her words literally knocked me off my feet. I couldn't understand what she was trying to say. I expected to see excuses or even tears. But there was none of that. She looked tired, like she had to admit it, but didn't want me to be hurt by it. Wait, I grabbed her hand, not knowing what to make of what I was hearing. You're trying to tell me that you weren't hiding something because you cheated, but because you were, protecting me? Protecting both of us? What the hell? Lena closed her eyes as if it was hard for her to look at me. I was afraid. I was afraid that you wouldn't understand, that you wouldn't support me, that this truth would ruin us. It wasn't a choice I wanted to make, but it had been made, and I couldn't go back. I was silent, trying to comprehend her words. But each new sentence seemed even more confusing. She was talking about it like it was her only option, but what she was trying to explain to me was hardly getting any clearer. Lena, I need to understand what you're saying. You can't just talk in riddles. I saw these emails, and you say you were protecting us. Protecting us from what? What were you trying to protect me from if you were actually cheating on me? Lena sighed and finally opened her eyes. She didn't hide her gaze, but there was no justification or fear in her eyes. She just told the truth. You didn't know, Alex, but this all started a lot sooner than you think. This man I've been hanging out with, he was a part of my life before you and I started being together. He was my friend, but not just any friend. We both went through things that you don't know about, and I couldn't talk about it. I was afraid that if you knew, you wouldn't understand. I stood there in utter bewilderment, trying to understand her words. It was some kind of nightmare unfolding before my eyes. You're saying it's not cheating? Are you serious? I asked the question, even though I realized that she had already explained her motives to me. But I couldn't understand how she could talk so calmly about what I called betrayal. Lena looked at me with an expression that I couldn't call mere helplessness. It was as if she was searching for something in my eyes, hoping I would understand her explanation. It wasn't cheating, Alex. It wasn't what you think it was. It was something else. He was a part of my life before I met you. I was afraid you wouldn't realize that nothing happened between us. It was all about what I'd been through years ago, and now I didn't know how to tell you. Everything I did was just me trying to figure things out. I was afraid that you would leave if you knew the truth, and then I would lose both you and my soul. My hands shook as I realized what she was saying. Everything I knew about our life was now shattering. I couldn't believe that everything that was happening was so complicated, so layered. She wasn't just hiding the affair from me. She was hiding her worries, her fear, her inner conflicts. But the strangest part was that I still didn't know the whole truth. My head ached with so many questions that had no answers. Lena, I need to understand everything. I felt my voice losing strength, but I couldn't stop. You say you're afraid of losing me, but don't you realize that I've lost you already? Silence reigned in the room. We both realized that no words would bring us back to what we had before. But I knew the truth was even more complicated than I could have imagined. Now I didn't know what would happen next. The truth I was looking for was just another layer in this strange, confusing maze, and I didn't know how to get out of it. I sat on the edge of the bed, and silence stretched around me. She was in the room, but there was a whole world between us. A world I'd destroyed myself. I didn't know what to do now. I didn't know what to do with it all, how to react, how to go on living with what I had learned. The truth I found seemed not only unexpected, but uncomfortable. It was breaking everything I believed in, everything I had built. And now I sat there trying to figure out how to move forward at all. Lena, with her revelation about the past, couldn't give me any clear answers. Every step she took, every phrase she spoke, every look she gave me, they posed new questions for which there were no ready solutions. She tried to explain her fears and doubts, her attempts to protect me and us, but every answer she gave only complicated the picture. It became unbearably hard for me. Why had she kept her connection to this man from me? Why didn't she say everything right away, when I could have understood her, when I could have been there for her? Why did I have to dig up her secrets to get even a fraction of the truth? But that wasn't the only thing that tormented me. I didn't know what to do. I sat in front of her trying to focus, but her words, her revelations felt like they exploded all my inner convictions. I didn't know what this meant for us. I didn't know how we should be. Lena and I. How can you build a relationship on such grounds? She and I had been around each other for so many years, and it always seemed like we understood each other, that we had something more. But it turned out that it was all questionable. And now, after everything we'd been through, I couldn't answer the most important question of all. What would happen to us? We had both changed, but how would that affect our future? Could I trust her, knowing what she was hiding? Could I go back to the trust one had before? What will happen to our home, to our family, to the children if we ever have them? I could feel my mind muddling through these questions. It was impossible to answer them, because each answer would open up more questions, more doubts. All I knew was that nothing would ever be the same. I tried to make sense of her words. She explained that her actions were driven by fear, that she was afraid of losing me, that she thought she was doing the right thing. But really, is there any excuse for silence? Can one justify being secretive and deceitful, even if it is motivated by good intentions? I didn't know myself. Maybe she was right. Maybe we had both lost ourselves in these years, in this world full of secrets and innuendo. Maybe we had both fallen victim to our own fears and doubts, and now it was up to us to unravel the tangle, trying to figure out what we had lost in the first place. I looked back on everything that had happened. The moments when it seemed that everything was going to be okay, that we were in control of our lives, that Lena and I were able to build something real. And now I wondered, what was it? What if it was real? And what of it would I still be able to keep? Lena sat next to me, and I could feel her worry. But even she didn't seem to know what to do. She couldn't give me an answer to all my questions. Or maybe she didn't want to. Maybe she wasn't ready to accept that things had changed either. What now? Where to go? I thought about it, but I didn't know what to do with that knowledge. Should I have turned a blind eye to everything that had happened? Forget. But then what would be left? How could we continue to live together if our relationship was on such shaky ground? All I knew was that there was no easy way out. Lena and I were both standing on the edge of something. I could feel it, but I didn't know what the next part of this journey would be. Once we crossed that line, it was impossible to go back. We could only move forward, but in what direction? How could I continue to believe in her after what she was hiding? And how could she continue to believe in me after what I was doing to unravel her secrets? We were both truly lost, each in our truth, each in our decisions. Nothing was easy. I didn't know what to do, but I felt that I had to move forward, no matter how difficult it was. After all, at the end of the day, we don't decide how things end. Life will find its own way, and Lena and I will have to either find a solution or let it all tear us apart. What will happen to our family? What will happen to us? How many more secrets and innuendos are hidden in our hearts that we've been so careful to hide from each other? I stood up, glancing at Lena, and in her eyes I saw no answers. We were both standing on the edge of a precipice, but what came next, we both didn't know yet. Anyway, one thing was clear now. We couldn't go back to the way things were. All that was left was to move forward, to look for the answers we both needed to find.